"My name is Muhammad Ali, sir." The words thundered through the packed courtroom like lightning splitting the sky. Every eye turned toward the man who had just transformed from defendant to defiant champion in a single breath. The judge's gavel froze mid-air, reporters' pens stopped scratching, and even the bailiffs seemed to hold their breath. This wasn't just any man standing trial. This was Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion of the world, facing 5 years in prison for refusing to fight in a war he believed was wrong. What happened next would echo through history and change everything we thought we knew about courage, conviction, and the price of standing up for what you believe in. The year was 1967, and America was bleeding. Young men were dying in the jungles of Vietnam while protests raged in the streets back home. The Selective Service had called upon Cassius Clay, but the man they summoned no longer existed. He had shed that name like old skin, embracing his new identity as Muhammad Ali, a proud Muslim who would not compromise his beliefs for anyone, not even Uncle Sam himself. The government wanted their golden boy, their Olympic champion, to march off to war like a good soldier. Instead, they got something far more dangerous, a man who refused to be silenced. The Houston courthouse buzzed with tension that morning as Ali arrived, his entourage cutting through the crowd of reporters and protesters like a ship through stormy waters. Cameras flashed, capturing every angle of the man who had become the most controversial figure in sports. Some called him a coward, others a hero, but everyone knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. A black athlete at the height of his fame was choosing principle over profit, conviction over comfort, and the consequences would be devastating. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I need your help to keep bringing you these amazing historical moments. Hit that subscribe button right now. Yes, even if you're watching on your TV or computer, because your subscription helps us reach more people who love these powerful stories. And here's something super important. Click that hype button. It's crucial because it tells the algorithm to show our content to more viewers, helping us grow this community of history lovers. Drop a comment below and let's build something special together. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Federal Judge Joe Ingram presided over proceedings that would determine not just Ali's fate, but send shockwaves through American society. The prosecution painted Ali as an unpatriotic draft dodger who thought himself above the law. They argued that his religious conversion was convenient timing, a calculated move to avoid military service. The evidence seemed stacked against him. After all, how could a man who made his living through violence claim to be a conscientious objector? Ali's legal team, led by the brilliant Hayden Covington, faced an uphill battle. They had to prove that their client's religious beliefs were sincere and that his objection to war was genuine, not a publicity stunt. The challenge was immense, convincing a predominantly white conservative jury that a brash young black boxer had legitimate religious convictions that superseded his duty to his country. The stakes couldn't have been higher. 5 years in federal prison and a $10,000 fine awaited if they failed. As the trial progressed, witness after witness took the stand. Military officials testified about the importance of the draft, while religious scholars debated the legitimacy of Ali's beliefs. The boxer himself sat quietly, his usual bravado replaced by a focused intensity that few had ever seen. This wasn't the ring where he could dance and jab his way to victory. This was a different kind of fight, one where words and principles mattered more than physical prowess. The prosecution's case seemed airtight. They presented evidence of Ali's previous statements, his lifestyle, and questioned whether someone who fought for a living could truly be opposed to violence. District Attorney Morton Sussman painted a picture of a privileged athlete trying to have his cake and eat it too, enjoying the benefits of American freedom while refusing to defend it. The government's message was clear. No one, regardless of fame or fortune, was above the law. But then came the moment that would define everything, When called to testify in his own defense, Ali rose from his chair with the same confidence he displayed entering the ring against Sonny Liston. The courtroom fell silent as he approached the witness stand, every person present understanding they were about to witness something extraordinary. This wasn't just about one man's refusal to serve. It was about the collision between individual conscience and government authority, between religious freedom and patriotic duty. The prosecutor began his cross-examination with surgical precision, attempting to dismantle Ali's claims piece by piece. He questioned the timing of Ali's conversion to Islam, suggested his religious beliefs were shallow, and implied that his real motivation was fear. The questions came rapid-fire, designed to rattle the defendant and expose what the government believed were lies and contradictions. For lesser men, the pressure might have been overwhelming. But Muhammad Ali was not a lesser man. When the prosecutor addressed him as Cassius Clay, attempting to diminish his chosen identity, something shifted in the courtroom's energy. Ali's jaw tightened. His eyes flashed with the same fire that had intimidated countless opponents, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. The words that followed would be remembered long after the legal proceedings ended, a declaration that transcended sports and entered the realm of civil rights history. The impact was immediate and profound. Spectators gasped, reporters scribbled frantically, and even the judge seemed taken aback by the power of Ali's response. This wasn't just a defendant pleading his case. This was a man claiming his identity, his dignity, and his right to exist on his own terms. The prosecution had expected to break him down, to expose him as a fraud, but instead they had unleashed something far more powerful than they anticipated. What followed was a masterclass in conviction under pressure. Ali explained his beliefs with a clarity and passion that surprised even his supporters. He spoke about his faith, his understanding of the Quran's teachings on war, and his genuine belief that participating in the Vietnam conflict would violate everything he held sacred. The man who had once proclaimed himself the greatest now stood before the court not as a boastful athlete, but as a human being fighting for his soul. Hey, my friends, we've reached the end of this first part of Muhammad Ali's incredible courtroom battle. Help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth. The second half of this story will reveal the shocking verdict and its aftermath that changed America forever. You won't want to miss what happens next. The jury deliberated for just 21 minutes. 21 minutes to decide the fate of the most famous athlete in the world. When they returned to the courtroom, their faces revealed nothing, but the speed of their decision sent chills through Ali's defense team. In federal court, quick verdicts rarely favored the defendant, especially in cases involving draft resistance during wartime. The foreman stood, his voice steady as he delivered the words that would echo through history. Guilty on all counts. The gavel came down like thunder, but Ali never flinched. While his lawyers immediately filed appeals and the courtroom erupted in chaos, the newly convicted champion sat with the same composure he'd shown facing Sonny Liston's devastating left hook. Judge Ingram sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison and a $10,000 fine, the maximum penalty allowed by law. But the real punishment had already begun the moment Ali refused induction. His boxing license was stripped, his passport confiscated, and his prime fighting years stolen away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like vultures, shouting questions about appeals and regrets. Ali's response was vintage Muhammad Ali, but with a gravity that hadn't existed before his conviction. He spoke not as a defeated man, but as someone who had chosen his path with full knowledge of its consequences. "I'm not going to jail," he declared, referring to his planned appeals. I've been in jail for 400 years. I could be in jail for 4 or 5 more, but I think I got a good chance of winning the case." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours of the verdict, boxing commissions across America moved to strip Ali of his licenses. The World Boxing Association had already taken his title months earlier when he refused induction, but now even the possibility of fighting professionally vanished completely. The man who had electrified the world with his speed, power, and charisma was suddenly persona non grata in the sport that had made him famous. Promoters who had once begged for his signature now wouldn't return his calls. The financial devastation was immediate and crushing. Ali had been earning millions per fight, but now faced legal bills that mounted daily while his income disappeared entirely. His entourage scattered, fair-weather friends vanished, and endorsement deals evaporated overnight. The government's message was clear: challenge us and we'll destroy everything you've built. They wanted to make an example of Muhammad Ali, to show other potential resistors what happened to those who defied the system. But something unexpected began happening in the months following the conviction. While Ali couldn't fight professionally, he discovered a different kind of platform: college campuses across America. Students, energized by the growing anti-war movement, invited the exiled champion to speak about his experiences. These weren't the typical athlete appearances filled with sports anecdotes and motivational platitudes. Instead, Ali spoke with raw honesty about conscience, sacrifice, and the price of standing up for your beliefs. His first major speaking engagement came at Harvard University, where students packed the auditorium to hear from the man who had sacrificed everything for his principles. Ali arrived without the usual fanfare, no entourage of handlers and promoters, just a man with a story to tell. When he took the stage, the audience expected the familiar Ali bravado, the rhyming predictions and playful boasts. Instead, they encountered something deeper: a human being who had been tested by fire and emerged transformed. The speech was electric. Ali spoke about growing up in Louisville, about discovering Islam, and about the moment he realized he couldn't participate in a war he believed was wrong. He talked about the letters he received from soldiers in Vietnam, some supporting him, others condemning him, all of them young men caught in circumstances beyond their control. His voice carried a weight that hadn't existed during his early boxing career, the gravity of someone who had paid a real price for his convictions. The questions from students were pointed and challenging. They wanted to know if he regretted his decision, if the sacrifice had been worth it, if he would do it again, knowing the consequences. Ali's answers revealed a depth that surprised even his supporters. He spoke about sleepless nights, about watching his bank account dwindle, about the friends who had abandoned him when the money stopped flowing. But he also talked about something more valuable than wealth or fame: the ability to look at himself in the mirror without shame. Word of Ali's speaking abilities spread quickly through the college circuit. Universities that had never hosted a controversial speaker suddenly found themselves booking the exiled champion. His appearances drew massive crowds, not just students but faculty, community members, and curious observers who wanted to see this phenomenon for themselves. Ali was discovering that his voice, freed from the constraints of athletic competition, could reach people in ways his fists never could. The speaking fees helped, but they were a fraction of what he had earned in the ring. Ali's financial situation remained precarious. His legal bills continued mounting, and the appeals process dragged on with no guarantee of success. Meanwhile, his prime athletic years were slipping away. He was 25 when convicted, entering what should have been the peak of his boxing career. Every month that passed was a month of speed, reflexes, and power that could never be recovered. The personal toll was equally devastating. Ali's marriage to Sonia Roy crumbled under the pressure, unable to withstand the financial stress and constant scrutiny. Friends who had basked in his reflected glory during his championship reign now crossed the street to avoid association with a convicted felon. The man who had once been invited to every party, every premiere, every high society gathering, now found himself isolated and often alone. But isolation bred reflection, and reflection bred wisdom. Ali began reading voraciously, studying not just Islamic texts, but philosophy, history, and literature. He engaged with intellectuals and activists who saw in him something more than an athlete, a symbol of resistance against an unjust system. His conversations with figures like Malcolm X's widow, Betty Shabazz, and civil rights leaders deepened his understanding of his role in the broader struggle for justice and equality. The legal appeals continued their slow journey through the federal court system. Ali's lawyers argued that his conviction was flawed, that the government had failed to properly consider his religious objections, and that his rights had been violated. Each hearing brought hope, each setback brought despair, but through it all Ali maintained his position. He would not compromise, would not apologize, would not seek a face-saving middle ground that might restore his boxing license while abandoning his principles. Then, in 1970, something shifted in American public opinion. The Vietnam War had grown increasingly unpopular, with body bags returning home daily and no clear path to victory in sight. Anti-war protests had evolved from fringe demonstrations to mainstream movements involving millions of Americans. Suddenly, Ali's position didn't seem so radical. It seemed prescient. The man who had been vilified as unpatriotic was beginning to look like someone who had seen the truth before everyone else. The breakthrough came in June 1971, when the United States Supreme Court agreed to hear Ali's case. The 9 justices would decide whether his conviction would stand or whether his religious objections had been improperly dismissed. The oral arguments drew massive media attention, with legal scholars debating the broader implications for religious freedom and conscientious objection. Ali's fate now rested in the hands of the highest court in the land. On June 28, 1971, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict in a unanimous decision that stunned the legal world. In clay verse. United States, the justices overturned Ali's conviction, ruling that the government had failed to properly specify why his draft exemption had been denied. The technical nature of the ruling disappointed some who had hoped for a broader statement on religious freedom, but for Ali, the specifics didn't matter. He was free. The news reached Ali while he was training for his comeback fight against Jerry Quarry. After 3.5 years in exile, he was finally returning to the ring, though questions remained about whether the layoff had permanently damaged his skills. The man who had once moved like a butterfly and stung like a bee was now 29 years old, his reflexes potentially dulled by inactivity and the stress of his legal battles. The comeback fight itself was anticlimactic. Ali stopped Quarry in 3 rounds, showing flashes of his old brilliance, but also signs of the toll his exile had taken. More important than the victory was what it represented. The return of a man who had sacrificed everything for his beliefs and lived to fight another day. The crowd's reaction was mixed, with some cheering his return while others still viewed him as unpatriotic, but no one could deny the courage it had taken to reach this moment. Looking back, Ali's stand against the Vietnam War and his subsequent conviction and vindication represented more than one man's legal victory. It was a watershed moment in American history, when an athlete used his platform not for personal gain, but for moral principle. His willingness to sacrifice his career, his wealth, and his freedom for his beliefs inspired countless others to examine their own convictions and consider what they were willing to sacrifice for what they believed was right. The man who had once proclaimed himself the greatest had proven it in ways that had nothing to do with boxing. He had faced down the full power of the United States government and emerged victorious, not through violence or cunning, but through unwavering commitment to his principles. Muhammad Ali had shown the world that sometimes the greatest victories come not from what you're willing to fight for, but from what you're willing to sacrifice for what you believe is right. Hey, my friends, we've reached the end of Muhammad Ali's incredible courtroom battle. Help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth.